And we are live. Hello there, I am Wyatt Wismer, and this is the second McMaster Competitive Programming information session. Now, the current McMaster Competitive Programming executive team consists of myself, the current president, our VP Events and Training, Michael Le, and our VP Finance, Lucas Dutton, who's here with us today. So diving right into things, I wanted to talk a little bit about what competitive programming actually is, because that can be kind of weird, very confusing. The most common question I probably get about competitive programming is whether hackathons are competitive programming, because if you think about it, I'm not sure how familiar our audience is with hackathons, but normally a hackathon is some event where you take a bus somewhere for perhaps like 2 or 3 days. You work on some like broad open-ended project, and at the end you'll present your project and try and compete for some prizes. So it is competitive. It does involve programming, but this is normally not what people are talking about when they're talking about competitive programming. Competitive programming typically refers to short, typically online programming contests where you have to type up like programs to solve like very specific problems. So if you've ever done a HackerRank or LeetCode problem in the past, these are actually competitive programming problems. And those sites, of course, are more geared towards the technical interview side of things. But some more, pure competitive programming for the sake of competitive programming sites would be Codeforces and Topcoder. So it's sort of ambiguous what I mean here by programming problems. So normally, this is just a textual description of like a regular problem you might encounter in the world. And what'll happen is you need to write a program that solves this problem. But it's a bit weird to how you might solve a problem in the real world, in that you'll be given the input to this problem as effectively like text input, and you need to like parse that text input, then perform your logic and produce some text output that has the desired answer. So just as an example, right off the bat of that, you might be given, for instance, let's say the map of a city, let's say locations in a city and roads in the city between those locations, and you might have to find the most efficient path from some position A to some other position B. So that would make be an example of a simple competitive programming question. And to really put that into context, I thought it'd be fun to work through a short example. So I'm going to open up this HackerRank challenge and work through it with you guys. So this HackerRank challenge is called min-max sum, and as you can see here, we are given 5 integers, and we need to find the minimum and maximum values that we can compute by summing exactly 4 of the 5 integers. So for instance here, we are given the array 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. So the minimum sum we can make by summing 4 of these values would be to sum the 4 smallest values, which would give us a sum of 16. Alternatively, the largest sum we can make by summing 4 of these values would be summing the 4 largest values, which would be 3 plus 5 plus 7 plus 9, which would give us 24. And they want us just to output this minimum sum followed by this maximum sum. So as a problem, that makes sense, but now let's consider really from a programming perspective. So from a programming perspective, what our program's going to take in is something that looks like this. We're just going to get like this textual input that contains 5 integers, and we need to take that textual input and actually interpret it and compute the correct answer using the strategy we've come up with. And sorry, by that strategy I mean we taking the smallest 4 elements for the minimum sum and the largest 4 elements for the maximum sum. And then we just need to output this minimum sum followed by this maximum sum. Now, on a site like HackerRank, you can do this in a programming language, and typically you can choose from a variety of programming languages. So they have Python, which is what I normally do, but you can also do C++, Java, or a variety of other languages. I will say it's normally beneficial to know either Python, C++, or Java rather than a different language for competitive programming. And this is just because the main contest we participate in, called ICPC, actually only accepts solutions in Python, Java, and C++. So you'd want to know one of those 3. Oh, it's a really good question from Tommy. Is this going to be a tutorial? Not so much. We're mostly, I'm going to go through one problem now to give an overview just of what kind of competitive programming really is. And we're going to walk through, or not even walk through, but just talk about some problems that show up on ICPC. But then we'll just talk about like workshops and how you can get involved and more of that sort of stuff. Yeah. Yes. However, if you're interested in a tutorial, next Tuesday we'll be holding, I guess, a programming essentials workshop where we walk you through like setting up an environment to program in C++ and Python. Well, sorry, I should mention it's really like 2 sub workshops because we have one for C++ and one for Python, and we'll walk through like you getting set up and solving some simple problems. But today's really just an overview of everything. So with that in mind, for anyone who just joined us, yeah, we're trying to solve this problem where we're given these 5 integers, and we want to write a program that figures out the way to get the minimum sum and maximum sum if we only sum 4 of the 5 integers. So the first thing we need to do when we solve a problem like this is actually reading in the input. So we can do that in Python by calling this input function. This reads like a string of input. So after calling this, I'll have a string. And if I call .split on that, it'll split the string on spaces. So I'll now have a list of strings where each one of those list elements contains an integer. Oh, sorry. Tommy here wants to find the link to the problem. I can actually post this link right in the chat if you want to give it a shot yourself as well. You can maybe solve it while we're presenting. And HackerRank has a variety of other problems that are handy. But sorry, yeah, back on my train of thought. So after calling split, we'll have a list of strings, but really we want to work with integers, not strings. So we're going to call this handy Python function called map that will apply this function to every element in the array. So it'll apply this int function, which casts a string to an int. So instead of having a list of strings, we'll now end up with this like map of ints. Now, I don't really want to work with this weird map object, so I'm going to cast it to a list, and now after all this, I'll have a list of integers. Now this line looks pretty disgusting, but I highly recommend just like memorizing this line and using it, because you can use this to read like a line of space-separated integers, which is something you typically have to do like fairly commonly. But once we have this, the rest of the problem is really easy. We know from our strategy we can find the minimum sum by just taking the sum of the first 4 elements. Oh, sorry. I said by taking the sum of the first 4 smallest elements. So what we can do to make sure the first 4 elements are also the first 4 smallest elements is we could sort our A. So now if we sort our A, we know these first 4 elements are going to be the smallest ones. And so if we sum them, we'll get our minimum sum. Now similarly, I can sum the last 4 elements, and that'll give me my maximum sum. And then we just need to print our min and our max. Now hopefully we got this correct. We can run it and see if we really did. And boom, yeah. So it seems we passed the sample test cases. So you see they give you like 2 sample inputs, and we see that ARM output matches the output that they expected us to get. And once we feel really confident, we can press submit code, and we'll get feedback right away saying that we did well. And if we made a mistake somewhere, then we get an error here saying that we like needed to fix something. So now I hope you have a bit of a better sense of what like competitive programming problems are. And with that in mind, like that problem is pretty boring. It's kind of just a boring like math problem. But the problems can get like really interesting. So this next problem that I'm showing on screen right now is actually from an ICPC contest 2 years ago. And I guess I already mentioned it, but ICPC is this huge contest for undergrads that we participate in every year, and we'll talk more about that later. But on screen right now, you'll see there's a grid, and there are these weird like ovally things on the grid. So the idea here is we're almost in like a gridlock scenario if you've ever played that game. So we've got a grid, and the idea is these are cars on that grid, and the number just corresponds to the label of the car. So we'll say, just for fun, like this is car number 2, this is car number 3, this is car number 10, and so on. And the goal of this problem is to find out if it's possible to move these cars around, like just slide them around, such that we slide the car off of this shaded in area. And it's sort of a nifty problem. For anyone who knows what a depth first search is, you can solve it with a depth first search, but that's not immediately obvious, and it's really cool to code. So another problem that's sort of interesting. So this problem, it's you'd think it'd be easy. It's deceptively hard. It was also from a contest, I think like a year or 2 ago, and I believe only one team who was at like our ICPC site actually managed to solve it. So I'll actually explain the problem now. So normally when you cut a pizza, in real life, you normally cut it into wedges, like similar to how you'd cut a cake. And then each slice ends up being like the same shape and having the same area. Now for this problem, the question they ask you is, they give you like basically an uncut pizza, but then they tell you you're going to try and cut this pizza into like this weird rectangular grid, where they'll give you the coordinates of one of the grid intersections and the width and height of each rectangle, and they want you to cut up the pizza like just following that information. So maybe we like start here and like go along like cutting all these rectangles, and then we'll be left with these kind of odd like misshapen pieces. Then what they want you to do, like for your problem, is output the number of these pieces which are beneath a certain size. So this seems really easy to do intuitively, but you end up needing to do some interesting geometry things and other optimizations to get it run in time. And it ends up being like a pretty interesting problem. And all right, one more like similarly quite hard problem, but that's interesting to look at, is this problem, which was from last year's ICPC regional contest. So this problem here is, you're given this grid of squares, and we have some open squares, which are these white squares, and some like filled in squares, which are these black squares. And we also have these green dots, which we'll call treasure. And we want to figure out if it's possible to fill in this grid with squares, like you see over here, such that every spot is in a square, and every square has exactly one piece of treasure. Now, this is like a very like weird problem to think about, but I think it's cool visually, and it's cool just to think about, so I included it here. Alright, now, while competitive programming contests are cool, there is like other motivation to learn competitive programming. Specifically, nowadays, if you want to work at Google or Microsoft or any other like tech company, the standard now is that all of them have technical interviews. And so these are interviews where, rather than asking you standard, like they will still ask you some behavioral questions typically, but the large like focus of these interviews is like solving algorithm problems. And normally this can happen like either on a whiteboard, or like nowadays they might even like give you a phone interview where you have to type up things in a Google document. Oh yeah, it can seem like that. Some companies are really sketchy and they actually will send you like IQ test things. That's honestly normally a bit of a red flag. Normally they're a bit better, I guess. The most common thing you'll see is this last option here, which is like a take-home coding challenge, where it's basically like they'll give you like like 3 or 4 questions in 2 hours to solve like some common questions. So you'll solve like 2 or 3 algorithm questions in just like a set period of time. So that'll either be a HackerRank coding challenge typically, or this thing called Codility. Now I will say, this one Codility, I've got a lot of them recently. They're really sketchy in that the hiring manager can go back and see what your code looked like at every point of the submission, so they can see your whole process. So it's a bit higher stress than a normal HackerRank test. But what I should say then, and what I'm getting to, is that it's really helpful to have these things like really under your fingers and like have a good sense of how to solve these problems. And to that end, it just so happens that the sort of problems we solve in competitive programming are like super similar to the problems you solve in technical interviewing. If I was to be really accurate, I'd say, in fact, competitive programming covers like a much broader range of problems. So if you're comfortable with competitive programming, you'll be very comfortable with your technical interviews. And so I can easily just like say this, but to give a bit more evidence towards that actually being true, MCP has sent off many of our students to go work as either interns or to take full-time positions at the companies shown here. Now, while competitive programming can get you a job, it's also just like really fun to do. Like it's like I think technically on Wikipedia it's listed as like a mind sport or something, but there's tons of these contests you can participate in, and these contests themselves can also get you jobs and look really good on your resume, but they're also just like really fun. So the biggest contest that we do as undergrads is this thing called ICPC, which I guess I mentioned earlier a bit, but it's just a huge worldwide competition for undergrads. And so I'll talk more about that in a later slide, but this photo in the top right here would be a snippet from the 2018 ICPC World Finals. Another contest you might have heard about is the Google Code Jam, which is a yearly contest hosted by Google. Now, if you want to work for Google, it's definitely not a bad thing to do. There's also a similar Facebook Hacker Cup that gets hosted every year. And then finally, of course, here at McMaster, I say that I'm actually currently calling in from Calgary, Alberta, on the other side of the country. But here at McMaster, we actually host like fairly regular like training contests, and every year we'll have tryouts for this ICPC contest I mentioned. So in this bottom right, this is a photo from last year's tryout. So, I wanted to talk more about this. The International Collegiate Programming Contest, which is a mouthful to say, so ICPC, is a huge contest which 50,000 students, like I guess around 50,000. And so the structure of this contest is at the first level, we'll have tryouts, like at McMaster, which will be just McMaster students participating. And at that level, it'll be an individual contest, so you don't have to worry about finding teammates. But the top 6 people from this contest will go on to form the 2 senior teams that we send to regionals. And then from the remaining participants, the top 3 students who are in first year or second year will go on to form our junior team. So even if you're in first year or second year right now, and you're not like super confident in your like competitive programming stuff, like you can still like do well enough to qualify and like, I know, learn a bit, see what it's like, and maybe come back in a future year on a senior team. And so if we do well enough at regionals, we go on to the North American competition. And if we do well enough there, you go on to the World Finals, which would, I guess, of course, is the dream. All right. And I guess a bit more context for us, too. We compete in the East Central North America region. And you know what? I should actually send a link to this, because I feel like I didn't send a link last time. So all the past results from our region's contests are available online. So I'm actually going to link this in the chat. You can like look at these. You can see like this is last year's results. You can go to standings and see how everyone did. And if you replace this 19 here with like an 18 or 17, you can see even like previous year's results. So those can be kind of fun to poke through. You'll see Waterloo does disgustingly well, as you'd expect. But sorry, back to my main slides. The main thing I wanted to talk about with ICPC, because it's really weird this year, is that normally for ICPC we have tryouts in October, and our actual regionals we participate in are in November. However, this year, unfortunately, due to COVID, the regional competition's been delayed until March, so we won't be having our tryouts until next semester. So I guess the bright side to that is that if you want to like do some training now and get better, like now is definitely the time. Cool. So if any of this at all sounds interesting, the best way to stay in the loop is to sign up for the MCP mailing list. And I'll be sending out these slides after, just a link. I'll put a link in the chat. And there's one weird thing here. For whatever reason, McMaster emails don't work with it, so you have to use a non-McMaster email. But so long as you're signed in with a non-McMaster email, it should work. And if it doesn't work for whatever reason, you can contact us. And it also, I assume you're probably already signed up for this if you're here, but we have an MCP Facebook group. And we post all our events on there as well. And if you're feeling particularly gung-ho, we also post all our events and some extra training material on our Notion. So Notion's sort of just like an online documentation tool, and we use it to document like training material and other things. So for instance, if I go to this training tab here, you'll see since about early August, we've been posting some training that people can go through on their own time. So this is like totally self-directed and like optional, so don't feel like pressured to do this. But it starts out from the bare essentials of setting up your environment and works through to like harder like data structure concepts and things you need to do well. So yeah, I highly recommend that. And of course, sorry, I should say too, we also post like our events here. Like you'll see like this information session is on here. We have like just a fun like training contest tomorrow, and that's on here too. Cool. So now, talking about some of our upcoming workshops. So we as I said, we've been posting training content since August, but we don't expect you guys to already be like on top of that and like know everything. So over the course of the next few weeks, we're just going to be doing some introductory workshops. So in particular, next Tuesday, we're doing this Programming Essentials workshop where we show you how to set up an environment, either in Python or C++, and then solve some simple problems. Like we found for a lot of people, if you have no experience with competitive programming, like just knowing like how to take input and produce output in the right format can be kind of weird at first. So we're just really helping with that. And then I guess a bit more exciting, a few weeks later on October 8th, we'll be hosting our data structure workshop, going through a lot of data structures. I guess this is like very good for, I guess, for I don't know, just like interview stuff, because it'll be like, we'll cover like linked lists and like binary search trees or anything you might encounter. Yeah, map is like, yeah, like that one line is like pretty killer, eh? Like especially if you haven't done that much Python, like this just like, wow, I closed it. Wait, this just looks like pure voodoo. Like what the hell is this, right? Especially map. It's for anyone who wants to like be even more confused, Map in Python is technically produces a generator. In Python 2, it used to produce a list, so this was simpler, but now it produces a generator, so it can be super confusing if you're new to this. But like for now, I'd recommend like even just like copying and pasting, like using this as verbatim. But you can learn a lot just by like figuring out how this works. Cool. All right. Oh, I should mention too. So since August, along with our training material, we've been hosting training contests every Saturday. So there's actually one error on here. I say that our last contests are this Saturday and next Saturday. I was off by one. We actually have 3 more contests if you include the one tomorrow. But these are just like contests that happen every Saturday. How they're structured is the first few questions on these contests are easy, and they get like dramatically harder throughout. So I still think they're good if you don't have that much experience. But if you're completely new, I don't recommend them. Oh, but I will say they are also fun in that a T-shirt's given every time, and that nobody can win a T-shirt twice. So you have very good odds of winning a T-shirt if you try it. It's very fun. Okay, now if any of this sounds interesting, to the point where you think like, hey, maybe I want to do this in the future, especially since I should say our current executive team is all 4th-year members. So we're gonna be like, I guess at the end of this year we'll be moving off, and like a lot of positions are gonna open up. So currently applications are open for VP internal and VP external. So you can actually apply for those here if you're interested in that sort of thing. We are also debating having like different like first-year representative, second-year representative sort of thing, and we might open those up if there's enough interest, but it'll depend on how much interest we see. Cool. Oh yeah, and then I wanted to finish off just with some general advice. So I think a lot of people find with competitive programming that it's like super daunting at first. So like competitive programming has a ridiculous like learning curve. Like there's a bunch of like jargon and other stuff that makes it really like scary to look at. Like people will say things like, oh, it's DFS, it's BFS, it's a graph problem, it's DP, it's like flow with this other thing, and that makes like absolutely no sense if you haven't seen those things before. So like don't be discouraged if it seems super confusing and hard to like even understand what it's asking at first. But like if you give it like literally like I think like I shouldn't assign like a specific time, but you give it like a few weeks, it becomes much better. And to that end, there's a really good site called Codeforces that has contests at a variety of difficulty levels. So actually, I'll open up Codeforces right now. So if you go on to this site, you can go to this contest tab, and you'll see a bunch of upcoming contests. I recommend writing these Div 2 contests. So the idea with Codeforces is there's like Div 1, Div 2, and Div 3 contests, where like Div 1s are the hardest, they're like super crazy difficult, and Div 3s are the easiest. And honestly, I recommend trying to write Div 2s and Div 3s to start. Even I like write mostly I write like Div 2s, and I mean I write like all of them now, I guess. But like you can learn like a bunch from writing any of them, and it's like pretty fun. And then yeah, I guess to that end too, make sure you actually enjoy yourself. Like this is not meant to be like a grind. Like if you're not enjoying it, like don't do it. Like it's meant to be fun. Yeah. And with that brings us to our question period. I hope I didn't burn through that too quickly. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, and Lucas and I are here to answer them. Whew. Yeah. Ooh. Okay, I should have the slides posted like just right this second in the chat. I hope you guys can see that. I just did it like after I saw the question. Ooh, so I actually didn't start competitive programming really until first year. So what happened actually is I was walking through ITB, and I saw this like sketchy poster on the wall advertising ICPC, and I thought like, hey, like I'm not doing anything like this afternoon, like I'll go check it out. And I ended up like just barely qualifying, like by default even. Like I think only back in those days it was a lot less popular, and I think only like 9 people or something showed up, so I qualified by default to go to regionals. But then I ended up really enjoying it, so I did a lot more over the summer. And then like I just kept going like every year, and the club like grew a bunch. So it was kind of fun to like be through all of that. Like we ended up going through a rebranding like a year or two ago as well. Like we used to be Mac ACM, where we were like the school's like ACM chapter, but then we rebranded to McMaster Competitive Programming, which also makes sense since this ICPC used to actually be sponsored by ACM, and it's now like no longer sponsored by ACM. Like it used to be called the ACM ICPC, and now it's just called the ICPC. Although lots of people still call it by the old name. But yeah, so yeah, don't worry if you like. You don't have to have been doing this for like 10 years or anything. Like you can pick it up. Like Lucas picked it up in second year. I pretty much picked all of it up over the course of like first year summer. Yeah, that's actually it's so true. So if you do enough competitive programming, like algorithms class in second year actually like honestly just becomes a joke. Okay. You don't have to feel late as a third year either. I know it's very doable. And like the worst case too, like let's say like the worst case like is like let's say you train but you don't make it onto an ICPC team. Even then, like it helps you with like actually getting interviews, because like any technical interview you do, they're gonna ask you these questions, and like you can be on the ball and actually be able to answer them all. No, algorithms isn't that bad, honestly. Even if you haven't done competitive programming, it's not like a bad course. But I'm obviously super biased, but I think it's all right. What do you think? Lucas, did you actually attend lectures for algorithms? Periodically? No. I like the assignments. They were fun. Yeah, so you have to be able to actually bring it to fruition, and like typos and things matter, and like off by one errors matter. Oh, you have midterms already? Oh my god, busy guy. But that's awesome. Yeah, so you do have a lot of time. So like, as I said, I guess regionals aren't until March. So like tryouts will be in like probably like January or February. So you have a lot of time to train. Oh, 2DM3? Oh. So if you need any help with 2DM3, I guess Lucas can talk on that. Cuz yeah, how many years have you been TAing 2DM3, Lucas? That's your 3D. My god. Oh yeah, so like Lucas is our local, yeah. Ooh. Here's a good one. Advice for not failing coding challenges, internships. Okay, so a few good things for this. So the most common coding challenge you'll get are like the hacker rank take home challenges. And the nice thing about these is that companies are really cheap, and like by default, the cheapest option gives them like a pretty limited set of questions, and most companies end up choosing like pretty much the same questions. It's like, oh my god, I did the same questions just like over and over again when I was like grinding jobs this one year. So like if you can apply to a few jobs and like get just like one or two of the coding challenges and like work through them, you'll start to see all the questions very quickly. But also to like to help yourself along with that, it really doesn't hurt to work through some hacker rank challenges and work through some leak code challenges. Yeah, no, it's honestly sort of cheating. But even like that's honestly expected. It's kind of bad. A lot of people like are can get like really mad about the fact that I know that a lot of people are kind of against the widespread usage of algorithm stuff for interviews, just because people just like memorize the questions, and like there's few of them, I guess normally that's like a really feasible thing to do. But I know I will say in a technical interview, getting the right answer is like a very small part of the process. Like they want to see how you actually like walk through the problem and can communicate your answer and can actually like drill them for like more details and whatnot. Also, since Brian was looking for internships, I think what is it? Oh, I don't know. I was gonna say like just make sure you apply early, just because the job postings close pretty soon. And I guess Brian's in third year, so I guess this doesn't apply. But if you're in first or second year, companies sometimes have separate programs for first or second years. Like I think there's the Google Step program, I think, or I forget if it's Google Practicum or Google Step, but that exists. And there's also the Microsoft Explorer program. And I think if we don't already have posting on Oscar Plus, we will have a posting on Oscar Plus soon for that. So those are worth looking out for. Like I think when I was in second year, I just applied to the Microsoft Explorer and the Microsoft regular posting, and like that's how I got like one of my internships. Like it does work surprisingly. But I guess the flip side to that is don't rely solely on Oscar Plus, because like it's a super limited amount of jobs. Like they barely list anything. No, fair enough. Yeah, our Lucas here is like super like research oriented, so he's not going for the corporate jobs. Oh, but Brian has a really good question. Do competitive programming questions also include design type questions? Not normally. That'd be pretty rare. Because I guess like because the format I guess is always this thing like it's always like you're given an input and you need to produce some output. So there's I guess I couldn't think intuitively how they'd mark like a design question. Like it's always marked by a computer rather than a human. Yeah. That being said, in some of the take home challenges, it's rare, but some companies will ask you to like explain things or like talk about some design thing. So you might want to watch out for that there, but it is pretty rare. Ooh, suggestions for other job resources. Ooh, I think God, I don't have a good answer for this. Like in my year, I googled around a bunch, and I think I found this big like GitHub repository that had like 200 jobs you could apply to or something, and they have things like that. But I guess I normally apply directly on the company site, and just know that like most big companies will have a separate like application section for like university students, and it's way easier to get hired. So just like look for like the specific like university hiring options for like companies you like, and like also especially if you're in like first year or second year or you don't have previous internship experience, it's super hard to get like your first job. So like even if your first job isn't like the best job in the world, like I just try and get like work experience, because like it's always like getting your foot in the door in the first time that's the hardest. Like for instance, like my very first summer I worked at like Hatch. And like Hatch makes like the Hatch building, but they're effectively like a civil engineering firm. Like they don't really make software. But I was doing like I was at least doing firmware for like temperature sensors, but like it's like barely a software job. But it's good just to get your foot in the door. Oh, really? Oh, gosh. You've been very unlucky. Although maybe they're trending in that direction. Practicing for design questions. Oh, I don't know. I guess I don't know. What would you say, Lucas? That's a yeah. Yeah. Do jobs have to be paid? Um, I'm not sure, but like it's really concerning. I would never do an unpaid internship. There's nothing in this world you could do to get me to do an unpaid internship. I think it's like the scummiest thing, especially since so with how co-ops work in Canada, the company effectively, I think it's something like effectively like half your wages get paid by the government. So like really, it's super scummy if they if they don't pay you. It's like definitely go for a paid internship. And I guess just thinking back to Brian's question, I don't know many specific good resources for that, like in terms of like challenge sites or anything. But there are like good like YouTube videos for like specific like design question walkthroughs and things. If you want to like Google a few of those, it's not great. I know it would take a while to go through, but better than nothing, I guess. Yeah, I've gotten some weird interview questions in the past. Lucas, this one time, this was for like the hedge fund like D.E. Shaw job, but it was like I walked into the room, I sat down, and the guy comes in and he says, "All right, I want you to estimate the tax revenue of the United States." And I was like, "Oh, like all right." So you can get some pretty weird questions. Or I had like an oh yeah, you go. Yeah, no, exactly. I'm also Canadian. I don't even know like how America's laid out or anything. Oh my gosh. Another good one I got is like a guy wanted me to solve. I don't know if you're familiar with Peg Solitaire. I don't. I feel like some people know it, but they don't know by that name. It was like this weird game where you have to like hop pegs over other pegs to try and like clear the board. Like it looks like, I think the most common one is like something like this. And it's like when you hop a peg over another peg, the peg in the middle disappears. But for one interview, I walk in and the guy shows me this like triangular peg solitaire board, sort of like this, and he asked me to like come up with like an algorithm to like solve it. And it's funny, the answer he was looking for was actually just to brute force it. Since you could show on the board he showed me, there's only 15 dots, which means there'd be like 2 to the 15 different states, and that's like so small you may as well just brute force it. So it was kind of jokes. Yeah, so it's like, so at the start you'd have like some board state, right? Like I think something like this is like the normal board state, and you just try every possible option. So like in this one, for example, you'd have 4 possible starting options, and from there you could like continue. Yeah, I mean that's effectively what this sort of thing is, right? Like it's just a big DFS tree. Most things are big DFS trees. Ooh, is there another platform? Oh, you mean like with how I'm talking to Lucas here? Or do you mean for competitive programming in general? Because for Lucas here, I'm just on like I'm just on like a hangouts call with him for the purpose of this information session. But for people chatting about competitive programming in general, there's actually so I know I mentioned Codeforces earlier, but there's a Codeforces like Discord server. Like it's like a Discord server for like this one like group, and they're like huge, and they have people talking on there like all the time. Oh, for MCP? Oh, for MCP, not really. For MCP, we just talk in like the Facebook group, mostly I guess, and we have the mailing list, which is also a Google group, but that's just like for notifications. Oh, how many interviews have I done? Wait, I'm gonna add these up. Wait, Lucas, have you done interviews? You can answer this first, maybe. I'm gonna tally mine in my head. 0 interviews. Oh no, well that's no good. Okay, wait, how many have I done? I did, so in first year, it's so hard to get in the door in first year. I think I only did like 2 or 3 interviews. I think literally like 2 interviews in first year. And then in second year, I was really lucky in that I interviewed with Microsoft early, and I just got the job right away, so I didn't interview with anyone else. But for the company like Microsoft, like there's a lot of interviews for the one job. Like there was originally like an on-campus interview where they came to a McMaster, and then after the on-campus interview, they fly you down, and I think it was like 5 interviews, like on location. Like that was really gross. 5 interviews like in one day. Let's see. After that, I think for Intel, it was only 3 interviews. For return offer from Microsoft, it was just like a single interview. And then this year, this year is probably like, or like not this year, but like before this summer, it's probably like 24 interviews or something, because I did a bunch of like random phone interviews before finally setting on this like one like company called like Desha. Ooh, oh, that's very easy. My favorite type of question, by far, are dynamic programming questions. So I definitely should not go through dynamic programming here. But all it is like yeah, I can kind of talk a little bit. So imagine you're solving like okay, I don't have a good visual. Maybe you know what? Maybe I can get a good visual here. So imagine you're calculating like Fibonacci numbers, and you say like Fibonacci number at like n is computed from Fibonacci number at n-1 and n-2. And if you wanted, you could write like a really dumb, like a brute force way of calculating this, where you just like have a recursive function. So in dynamic programming problems, what you typically do is you take like a recursive sort of approach like this, and you memoize at like this, you memoize solutions to subproblems. Now that sounds really crazy, like really weird. You're like, what the hell is memoize? Like, do you mean memorize? But all Memoize is just, it's a fancy word that means like kind of like to store or take note of. So it's like whenever you compute something, you store the solution for later. Like it's like caching. You store the solution for later, and if you ever see it again, you just load your old solution. So like if I was calculating Fibonacci numbers, and for example like I calculated like the 5th Fibonacci number, then if in the future I ever needed to calculate the 5th Fibonacci number again, I would just look up my old stored value, and I could just like store it in like an array or a dictionary or something for ease of access. And so really, that's all dynamic programming boils down to. but coming up with your recurrence, which is like your recursive step, and like what you're going to store, is really tricky, and that's like what makes them fun. But I really love those sort of things. Actually, if you wanna do more dynamic programming questions or try them out, there's this really good contest here. It has like 26 problems, and they start easy and get pretty hard. I'll post a link to that too. But I love this contest. This is like what got me into DP. Oh yeah, and then a really good question from Build In. When are the competitions happening this year? So our biggest competition is tryouts for ICPC. And now normally we have that this semester, but because of COVID, everything got delayed to next semester. So our tryouts will likely be in either January or February. So you have until then to like really train and get good. But aside from that, we host like pretty like regular like just training contests and like for fun contests, normally with like t-shirt prizes. Like even like literally like tomorrow we have like just like a small like training contest on HackerRank that you can sign up for. And then the 2 Saturdays after that we also have training contests. But then we probably won't have a contest for a few weeks. So we're debating trying out a few other formats. Like one thing we wanted to try, for instance, is while we've been doing these 2-hour contests, sometimes it's fun to do longer contests where you have like a ton of hours or like even days to think over the solutions. So we might try doing some week of codes where you have like a whole week to think over these problems and come up with a solution. So stay in touch for that. But all of it, if you sign up for the mailing list, you will be. Oh, I don't have the link to it here. There's a link to it in the slides. But if you sign up for the mailing list, you can be like notified for any contest we have. And the next best thing after that is to be in the Facebook group because we posted it all there too. But Facebook's pretty bad at notifying people, so mailing list is always better if you can do it. Oh, sorry, I said so much. Whew. Lucas, did you ever try this contest? Yeah, it's pretty good. Oh, stones is good. Interesting. Oh, we just got an interesting question from Brian. I guess it's like the mirror to his last question. What is our least favorite type of question? Oh, you can answer this? All right, you go. Yeah, I was gonna say messy implementation questions are like a huge pain. What else? I have a love-hate relationship with some geometry questions, because geometry questions are like so cool visually, because you can think about them visually, and like you can come up with like a cool visual solution. But then when you have to actually sit down and type them out, it'll be like 100 to 150 lines of like pain. Oh yeah, I can post. I posted the @coder link here, but I can post the Codeforces site as well. That's another useful site. So this one's Codeforces. I've already posted @coder. Yeah. Sad face from Brian. I'll post the Notion too, since I haven't linked that directly. Because we have everything linked from the Notion. Awesome. Also, I'm gonna nerd out a bit here, but a really good reference site if you're ever looking up like the implementation to something is this site right here called like cpalgorithms.com. So, bit of a background for this. So, like Russian people are like really good at competitive programming. I don't know why. It's like I don't know if it's like their school system or like something else, but they're like really good. Like there's a bazillion like really good Russian competitive programmers, and like this thing's Russian. This thing's Russian. Sorry, like this thing is actually there's originally some like Russian competitive programming resource, and it got translated to English. And that's what this is, but it has like really high quality implementations of like all the standard algorithms. Or I say all the standard algorithms. This is like pretty much like every algorithm under the sun that you'd ever encounter in a contest. That's like well known. So I'll post a link to this too, just because it's like I use this all the time. Nice. And cool. And so we have 5 minutes left, so if you've just been sitting here watching, make sure to get your like last minute questions in before this thing finishes up. And also, like, don't feel stressed to ask me like MCP related questions. You can ask like Lucas or I like anything about being like in software eng or anything related to that. Well, thank you, Brian. I feel it helps. Our information session yesterday covered the same content, so this is like our second run of it. So I think it's a bit better. But I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, and I'm sorry to bring you guys all here on like 6 p.m. on a Friday night. I know there are typically more exciting things to be doing on at 6 p.m. on a Friday night, but I thank everybody for joining us. Also, since I'm not getting any more questions, I'm gonna talk about a fun competitive programming word. So sometimes competitive programmers will say they're going to upsolve a question, and that's like a weird word that means to like solve a question after the contest is ended. So like after a contest, you'll like talk to your friends and be like, "Oh, did you guys see like question C? I just got my upsolve I just upsolved it, or I got my upsolved solution to work." It's kind of fun. Or like I'm gonna improve because I'm gonna upsolve. Oh yes, like, comment, and subscribe. I think technically we actually have I guess we do have a YouTube channel, so you can technically subscribe. Although it'll mostly just be like the live streams from like our training contests and stuff. But if you're into that, we were debating. So I'm still in touch. So the former MCP president was this guy called Daniel Wolf. I think he's working at Microsoft now, like full time. But he still writes like a lot of Codeforces contests. So we were debating with me, him, and this one other old like MCP guy doing like some team contests where we live stream them for fun. So we'll see if that becomes a thing. But I'll definitely post a thing if that actually becomes like reality. What I really like to do that I don't always get the chance to do is I can do live streams like this, but open up like a Google Jamboard or something and actually like draw the problems out and like work through them, which is really fun. And I guess one last shill in the last 2 minutes. If you like this sort of stuff, you think I want to do more of this stuff, or hey, these guys are going to be gone in 1 year, and I could be doing the one doing this stuff. We are hiring for like both of these positions, and even if you don't get these positions, there's a good chance we might open up like roles for like first year, second year, and third year representative, so you could still get a position doing that. So I'll put that out there. Oh, and definitely, I guess if you want to try writing a contest, you can try out our contest tomorrow. It'll start at our contest tomorrow will start at 12 p.m. Eastern time, and the first few questions should be approachable, even if you're not like super experienced. But they will get a bit harder near the end. But I will say, we've given out so many T-shirts at this point that most people have already won a T-shirt. So even if you don't get like first place or like second place, even you have a really good odds of getting a T-shirt. And we always like live stream the competitions too, so you can hear us like talking through them. Although I don't know, that might be too distracting, so I don't know if you want to listen to it during the contest, but that's always fun. But I guess we always do we go through afterwards and upsolve the questions too, so we actually explain the solutions, which can be better. Oh, Vim, hell yeah, dude, dude, Vim is where it's at. Look at I have there's this thing you can get called like the Linux subsystem for Windows, and I do most of my programming in that just because it's like convenient. And like literally, I go here. Oh wait, okay, wait here, and suddenly, boom, I'm in Vim, writing some C++. Whoa. I love Vim. I do all my stuff in it. I know. I like what I like about Vim is that when you type something, that's exactly what happens. So you have complete control. Like for a while, I was really paranoid about like, I don't know, being able to keep everything in my head at once. And I was doing like this weird training where I'd like blindfold myself and see if I could like solve a small like competitive programming problem blindfolded. I'm not sure I actually accomplished anything useful at all by trying to do that training, but it seemed really cool. What are your thoughts on this, Lucas? Yeah, could be good. Yeah, I guess, yeah, that's like the standard thing everyone does. I think programming blindfolded is easier than playing chess blindfolded. Because the good thing about programming blindfolded is if you get lost, you can just like Control F. Although in Python, in Vim, it's not Control F, it's like slash. But you can like search for a position in your code and like recover by going to that point, which is kind of fun. But yeah, but sorry, I think we've run over time. So I guess I'll bring this to a close. But thank you everybody for coming out. It was really fun to do this information session. And all of this will be recorded and put on the channel afterwards. So if you want to like check anything out again, it's all on there. But I will see you guys around. And peace.